terms of peace and stability in South Asia, Afghanistan has always been a very hot topic. What does India have to do with Afghanistan? Afghanistan has always been known as a graveyard of empires. Once upon a time, for a very long time, in fact, India did extend all the way beyond Afghanistan. A lot of people don't know that, but Afghanistan was always a part of India, ancient India. And what role does it play now in South Asia? Because it's so far away from India, we have Pakistan in between, and but it's still considered part of South Asia. And it's known to be home to tribal Pashtuns, who are a very different society than what democratic Indian society is today. What role does this play in terms of India's influence in the region, India's security, and in Pakistan, which is India's adversary? So let's go ahead and discuss Afghanistan today. Afghanistan's history goes all the way back to the Vedic times, when it was always a part of Sanatan Dharma, also known as Hinduism. The capital city of Afghanistan was always Gandhar. In the Mahabharata, the kingdom of Gandhar played a very big role in the events that led to the massive war, the Mahabharata War. When Buddha spread his message of returning back to the essence of Vedic teaching, which is meditation, back to the roots, meditation-based practice, this became a spiritual path in itself known as Buddhism. And Gandhar was one of the cultural hubs of Buddhism and was the hallmark of the spread and reach of Buddhism. Buddha is known as Shakyamuni Buddha, or the saint of the Scythians, although he was from India. Now this shows that what is present-day India wasn't always the limit of the extent of India. In fact, Ganeshas and other Hindu figurines have been discovered in places as far as Mexico and Turkey, but that conversation is for another time. In Central Asia, Buddhism flourished, Buddhism as well as Hinduism. And the last Hindu-Buddhist empire, the Kushan Empire, ranged all the way from the tip of South Kazakhstan to southern India. When the Sassanids took over, the rulers who were Zoroastrian allowed Buddhism to flourish until the empire's fall to the Ghaznavids. The Zoroastrians were kicked from Persia as Persia fell to the Arabs. Ever since, Afghanistan was known as the graveyard of empires, and Islam dominated the area. Fast forward to the modern era, Central Asia was under the Soviet Union, and a communist regime meant that the traditional Islamic lifestyle was in fact banned. Women were not allowed to wear niqabs and chadors, mosques were banned, and as the Soviets entered Afghanistan, the Americans supported and trained the Afghan Mujahideen, or Islamic fighters against the Soviet, obviously because they did not want communism to spread and they wanted democracy to spread instead. And they were afraid of Russia's extent, since Russia already conquered so-called one-fourth of the world. So radical Islam was used as a weapon to fight against the Soviets. After the fall of Kabul to the Taliban on September 27, 1996, the Taliban gained prominence and established a regime based on radical Islam, installing Sharia law. So the Americans as well as the ISI worked together to use radical Islam, fight the Soviets, kick them out. The Americans provided weapons, and the Taliban were trained on how to use these weapons. A lot of anti-aircraft guns, rockets, and finally the Soviets retreated, and so the Taliban was actually installed. And so here we have it. Many years later, the Taliban takes over. And then on September 9th, 2001, Ahmed Shah Massoud was assassinated by two Arab suicide attackers inside Afghanistan. 2 days later, about 3,000 people became the victims of the September 11th attacks in the United States when Afghanistan-based Al-Qaeda suicide bombers hijacked planes and flew them onto 4 targets in the northeastern United States. Then U.S. President George W. Bush accused Osama bin Laden and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed as the faces behind the attacks. When the Taliban refused to hand over bin Laden to the United States authorities and disband Al Qaeda bases in Afghanistan, Operation Enduring Freedom was launched, in which teams of the American and British forces worked with commanders of the United Front, or the Northern Alliance, against the Taliban. At the same time, when the US-led forces were bombing the Taliban and Al-Qaeda targets everywhere inside Afghanistan with cruise missiles. These actions led to the fall of Mazar-e-Sharif in the north, followed by all the other cities. As the Taliban and Al-Qaeda crossed over into the porous Durand border into Pakistan, in December 2001, after the Taliban government was toppled and the new Afghan government under Hamid Karzai was formed, the International Security Assistance Force, or ISAF, was established by the UN Security Council to help assist the Karzai administration and provide basic security to the Afghan people. The majority of Afghans supported the American invasion of their country. The war in Afghanistan, codenamed Operation Enduring Freedom, from 2001 to 2014, and Operation Freedom Sentinel, 2015 to present, followed the United States invasion of Afghanistan on 7th of October 2001, when the United States of America and its allies successfully drove the Taliban from power in order to deny Al-Qaeda a safe place of operations in Afghanistan. Since the initial objectives were completed, a coalition of over 40 countries, including all NATO members, formed a security mission in the country. The war has since mostly involved US and allied Afghan government troops battling the Taliban insurgents. The war in Afghanistan is the longest war in US history. Following September 11, when Bush claimed that the attack was carried out by Al-Qaeda and led by Osama bin Laden, who was living and hiding in Afghanistan and had already been wanted since 1998. The United States, because of the embassy bombings of the United States, President Bush demanded that the Taliban, who was the de facto ruling party in the country, hand over bin Laden. The Taliban declined to extradite him unless they were provided clear evidence of his involvement in the attacks, which the US refused to provide and dismiss as a delaying tactic. And then, October 7, 2001, launched Operation Enduring Freedom with the United Kingdom. To justify the war, Bush claimed that Afghanistan had only selective sovereignty, and the intervention was necessary because the Taliban threatened the sovereignty of other states. The two were later joined by other forces, including the Northern Alliance, the Afghan opposition, which has been fighting the Taliban in the ongoing civil war since 1996. And by December 2001, the Taliban and their Al-Qaeda allies were mostly defeated in the country, and the Bonn Conference, new Afghan interim authorities, elected Hamid Karzai to head the Afghan interim administration. The United States Security Council established the International Security Assistance Force, or ISAF, to assist the new authority with securing Kabul, after which a 2002 Loya Jirga, or Grand Assembly, became this Afghan Traditional Administration. A nationwide rebuilding effort was also made following the end of totalitarian Taliban regime. In the popular elections of 2004, Karzai was elected president of the country, now named the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. NATO became involved in ISAF in August 2003, and later that year assumed leadership of it. At this stage, ISAF included troops from 43 countries, with NATO members providing the majority of the force. One portion of the United States in Afghanistan operated under NATO command. The rest remained under direct US command. Following defeat in the initial invasion, the Taliban was reorganized by its leader Mullah Omar and launched an insurgency against the Afghan government and ISAF in 2003. Although outgunned and outnumbered, the insurgents from the Taliban and its ally, the Haqqani network, which also operates in Kashmir, and to a lesser extent the Hezb-e-Islami Gulbuddin and other groups, waged asymmetric warfare with guerrilla raids and ambushes in the countryside, suicide attacks against urban targets, and turncoat killings against the coalition forces. The Taliban exploited the weaknesses in the Afghan government to reassert influence across rural areas of southern and eastern Afghanistan. From 2006, the Taliban made significant gains and showed an increased willingness to commit atrocities against civilians. ISAF responded by increasing troops for counterinsurgency operations to clear and hold villages. Violence sharply escalated from 2007 to 2009. Troops began to surge in 2009 and continued to increase through 2011, when roughly 140,000 foreign troops operated under ISAF and U.S. command in Afghanistan. Of these, 100,000 were from the U.S. On 1st of May 2011, United States Navy SEAL forces killed Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad of Pakistan. NATO leaders in 2012 commended an exit strategy for withdrawing their forces. And later, the United States announced that its major combat operations would end in December 2014, leaving a residual force in the country. And in October 2014, British forces handed over the last bases in Helmand to the Afghan military, officially ending their combat operations in the war. On 28th December 2014, NATO officially and formally ended the ISAF combat operations in Afghanistan and fully transferred the security responsibility to the Afghan government. The NATO-led Operation Resolute Support was formed the same day as a successor to ISAF. At the beginning of Donald Trump's presidency in early 2017, there were fewer than 9,000 American troops in Afghanistan. By early of summer 2017, troops levels increased by about 50%. There were no formal plans to withdraw. In August of 2019, the Taliban planned to negotiate with the United States to reduce troop levels back to where they had been when Trump took office, but Trump canceled the negotiations after a Taliban attack. The Taliban remains by far the largest single group fighting against the Afghan government and foreign troops. On 29th February 2020, the United States and the Taliban signed a conditional peace deal in Doha, Qatar, which requires that the U.S. troops withdraw from Afghanistan within 14 months, so long as the Taliban cooperates with the terms of the agreement. Over 100,000 people have been killed in the war, including more than 4,000 ISAF soldiers and civilian contractors, more than 62,000 Afghan National Security Forces, 31,000 civilians, and even more Taliban. The United States on multiple occasions has shown interest with India putting its forces in Afghanistan. India, that has also considered the fact that Afghanistan has been a graveyard of empires for so long, has been reluctant to put its infantry in Pakistan. But as India declined the offer, the US was left with no choice but to trust Pakistan to help get the Taliban and the US to sit down for peace talks. This finally took place in Doha, Qatar in 2018. And the US will be leaving the Taliban soon, and when they do leave, it will be left with a big vacuum. This is going to lead to the ISI helping the Taliban overthrow the civilian government in Afghanistan. The Americans tried to establish democracy, but the tribal society of Afghanistan does not want democracy and never really did. They just wanted peace, and they do respect a powerful leader traditionally, and even a monarchy would have worked. Afghanistan turned out to be a failure for America, especially after the Taliban was defeated, as the efforts to establish the supreme rule became expensive, and at the same time, there needed to be a peacekeeping force in Afghanistan, because if there isn't, Afghanistan will fall, and Pakistan and the Taliban-controlled Afghanistan will become allies and will launch jihad in Kashmir and terror attacks in India, such as 26/11 and 1993 bomb blasts in Mumbai, and also the Delhi bomb blast will continue. So America, once it pulls out, there needs to be something or somebody or a peacekeeping force to replace it. And the reason that it is a failure in a way is because so many people died, and for what? Why did they die? Yes, the numbers of the Taliban have significantly reduced, but there could have been an alternative way to get the Taliban to agree to peace. And this took so long, and it took almost, I think, more than 20 years. Since 1996, it has taken over 23 years almost. So, if India doesn't do anything, and if there is no peacekeeping force, Pakistan will take advantage of their relationship with the Taliban, and such attacks will be launched against India's. And this is very open, something that, Pakistan's very open about. Since Pakistan is ruled and controlled by the Pakistan army, and since there's a lot of internal infiltration in India, this is definitely very true. But at the same time, a Taliban force in Afghanistan will be a nightmare for India. So India must go to war and establish a peacekeeping force that will maintain peace and stability in Afghanistan, similar to India's UN missions in Africa. Recently, the Afghan Taliban Twitter handle said that after Ramadan, the Taliban will launch jihad in Kashmir. A couple of days later, the official spokesperson for Taliban said in response to a fake Twitter handle, and there are many such handles by the ISI, some posing as Hindus, some posing as Arab princesses that are, trash talking and accusing Hindus of Islamophobia and etc., etc. And this handle said that the Taliban will launch jihad against Kashmir after Ramadan. But yet, a couple days later, the official spokesperson for the Taliban said that the Taliban does not want to interfere in the internal matters of another country. So this comes to India as a big surprise. And although it's a surprise, this is definitely positive news for India, and it shows that the Taliban is interested in peace. This is consistent with the United States peace deal with the Taliban also. So if the Taliban are interested in India being a moderator, then between the Taliban and the civilian government of Afghanistan, then India can definitely ensure that it will help to secure and establish peace in the region. But it is also known that the ties with the Taliban and ISI go way back to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and the ISI was caught red-handed by the CIA in 2011, and the U.S. Air Force deployed choppers and gunships to bomb Pakistani troops along the border that were assisting the Taliban against the U.S. forces. And soon after, Pakistan barred the United States from using its supply routes from Karachi to Kandahar for strategic supplies to the NATO forces. So these roads were closed immediately right afterwards. So the U.S. then had to spend 3 to 4 times more to supply its troops using alternate routes. This is the extent that Pakistanis have helped the Taliban and staked its own relationship with NATO forces. In Pakistan and Afghanistan, the Pashtun people know that the Punjab ISI wishes no good to Pashtuns in both countries and is only interested in using them for jihad, aside from which it has done no other good than mass killings and disappearances in Pakistan and supporting terror in Afghanistan. Therefore, India's goodwill peacekeeping task force will be welcome to both the government in Afghanistan and to the Taliban in Afghanistan if they agree, if they indeed do want peace. And it will keep Pakistan away from interfering in Afghanistan and using Afghani Pashtuns as brainwashable jihadis against India. Furthermore, both the Taliban and the Afghan government will cooperate to make sure Pakistan does not use its own people against India, because now it will be against Afghanistan's interests. And also this will secure Afghanistan as a strong ally of India, and Indian influence will gain a foothold over Pakistani and Chinese influence. Peace and stability in Afghanistan and continued support and investment in its infrastructure, creating opportunities and stabilizing the economy of Afghanistan, will be a key factor in South Asian peace. So China definitely wants to enter Afghanistan. It wants to keep spreading its wings its limbs, and definitely, it sees India not as a formal enemy, but definitely as an informal enemy and a fierce rival. And because of this, it knows, and because of the fact that it knows that India's cultural influence and goodwill also plays a very big role in its soft power and influence over other countries, such as Afghanistan, China will definitely be keen to gain foothold in this country. Also, Pakistan keeps that Taliban in its pocket. So this is something that's definitely going to go away if India can continue assisting Afghanistan and even put troops inside of Afghanistan to help them. And if there is a mistrust between the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan, India can definitely solve that problem. On the other hand, India was always reluctant to do this. And this was, again, I feel, a strategic mistake that India has made. In fact, when the United States approached India, India should have agreed. And because India didn't agree, they had to go with Pakistani support. But this is definitely a very surprising and welcome news. So, that the Taliban has shot down any fake Twitter handles claiming otherwise, that, the Taliban will be launching jihad. So if the Taliban definitely does want peace, although they're more radical and, practice a very radical form of Islam, even though that's the case, if both definitely want peace, they know who sponsors terror and which country it actually wants peace for Afghanistan. And if these jihadis can definitely be kept away from Kashmir, Pakistan will not rely on asymmetric warfare as much, because there will be pressure from Afghanistan to also make sure that Pakistan cannot use this. And if the Taliban, India, and the government forces can work together in securing Afghanistan's southern border, this will keep the ISI's recruitment in check for terrorism in Kashmir. So it is a very essential moment and time for India to take a very proactive approach towards peace and stability. For more videos, please subscribe to get the latest updates and hit like if you like this video. Jai Bharat.